Well, most of the times, I think everyone on the team has learned we have a value on our team, which is trust yourselves, but know when to trust others. It's important to know when to take a back seat. Everyone is on the team for a reason. They belong here. They have value to produce. You don't need to do the thing that they're good at doing. Just leverage that person. And that's really what I do when stuff gets hard. I find the right person to identify, find out who's the one that can like take us through that part of the problem, and just like take the back seat. And we don't have to do all of it.
Hello, I'm your host, Karan Mehta, and today on the show, we are joined by Vaibhav Gupta, CEO and co-founder of Boundary. Vaibhav is leading the charge to reshape how developers build AI apps by bringing predictability and confidence to prompt engineering. Prior to Boundary, Vaibhav worked at Google, Microsoft, Facebook, and eBay, bringing deep engineering expertise with AI ambition. Super excited, so let's dive in. Hey, Vaibhav, how are you?
Hey, nice to see you again, Karan.
Oh, wonderful, man. I've been looking forward for this conversation. So really appreciate you taking the time. I thought it would be nice for our viewers to hear a little bit about your journey, days in tech through Google to founding Boundary. That'll be awesome if you don't mind indulging us there.
Yeah. So, I mean, I started off, I learned how to code through a friend. And the only reason I really learned how to code, and this was like super late high school, like 12th grade or something. And only reason I learned how to code was I had an idea one day during lunch, and my friend was like, we can make that. We literally just went back to the dorm and he just started coding at that point. And I was like, my brain was just like, my mind just couldn't comprehend this idea of like an idea being really tangible right after that. So we actually got our whole school to use that platform right after that. And it was like idea to tangible value that was being created. And the idea was totally dumb. It was like a totally silly idea. But the fact that he could just conjure that like fascinated me from the get-go. So at that point, I started teaching myself how to code. I learned, I think my first programming language was C. Why? I have no idea. It just was the book around. And after that, I just coded pretty much all of college nonstop. And at some point, I got a job offer to go work at Microsoft. And Microsoft was not a sexy company back in 2015. It was not the company. The company we wanted to go to was Facebook or like Google or like something like that. And I did actually get an offer from Facebook at that time. And actually, the only reason I went to Microsoft was I remember getting on the call with my hiring manager at that point, and I chatted with him, and they couldn't tell me what I was working on at Microsoft. It was super top secret. And I remember the sentence that they told me was, "You will regret it if you don't join this team. I can't tell you what it is, but I promise you, the minute you hear about it, you will regret not being a part of it." And I am a kind of person that just likes building things, and building hard things. So I did take that leap of faith, and I did end up joining. And it turned out that that project I ended up joining was a HoloLens project. And HoloLens, for all of its misgivings of being a really bad product, was an amazing technical achievement. Like the amount of technology that we solved, and I had the fortune of actually joining one of the algorithm teams on there. So right out of undergrad, I did algorithm design on parts of these teams on computer vision technology. And I had no computer vision background. So it was one of the most fascinating spaces to work in. I worked there for a couple of years. I ended up being like a PM as well eventually, because I wanted to try my hand at it. Because I said, hey, PM seemed like they talk to a lot of people. Maybe I should do that because I like talking to people. I did that for about a year, and I was like, nah, I think you can have way more influence in the org just as one of the best engineers out there that happens to do PM things rather than being a PM that isn't allowed to do engineering. So I actually found that engineering was, in my opinion, the best way to have influence and drive the shape of the product rather than being a PM. So at that point, I did that, and then I actually started a company right after that in the ed tech space. I quit my job. I think everyone was really confused why I quit because my career was going well, but
Yeah.
I just the kind of person I was. I liked building things, even while I was at Microsoft. The whole time, almost every year, I tried some idea or the other, every single time. So I quit. I planned to take at least a year off to go and make it work in the ed tech space. We actually got to 5 figures revenue pretty fast in about 6 to 8 months, but I realized one thing that I personally hated was transacting educational value for money. Those two things didn't really fit well with me. So I said, if I'm going to help people, from an education standpoint, I'm just going to help them. I'm not going to think about like the cost of it. So I don't want to do a business in that space. So I actually ended up joining Google right after that to join their Face ID group and their augmented reality group. Worked there for a while, did a lot of high performance algorithm work. For context, like the work I've been doing now at this point for that whole time frame was actually in like writing algorithms in assembly. So it's not just about like algorithm design, it's about algorithm design in highly constrained scenarios for typically machine learning adjacent topics. So we did that for a couple years, and then again, we hit the check marks. We shipped everything. Face ID works, as you can tell on the Pixel phones. The AR technology works really well, even on low end devices. But at that point, it'd been like 5 or 6 years of me working in AR. So I said, let's like change it up a bit. And I started thinking about opportunities. And I actually ended up joining a hedge fund. I joined DE Shaw.
Very cool.
And that was super fun. It was the best job I've ever had in my life. I loved it. The pace at which people moved, the thoughtfulness that all the engineering team had. It reminded me actually of the early days of HoloLens.
Yeah.
And yes, there wasn't like a product mission like there was in HoloLens, but like the technical depth was there. It was like, and I'm not saying Google didn't have technical depth or later days of HoloLens didn't, but like the early days of HoloLens were super special. And the early days of joining D Shaw kind of brought that same energy back. And we solved some really, really hard problems. And I actually worked on like making parts of their core systems much, much faster. I'm talking like one system ran 33 hours. I brought it to under 5 minutes. Like I just love doing that kind of work. And at some point, I think I went through like breakup or something. I was like, what am I doing with my life?
Enlightenment moment. There you go.
Yeah, I was just like, what am I doing here? And I was just like, I think I want to restart. I think I want to do a company. And I think it's the thing I've been passionate about since like the age of 15 or something. Just want to build something from scratch. So then I kind of hit up my friend, my co-founder Aaron. I was like, hey, do you want to start a company together? I think he was at around the same phase in life. So he was like, screw it, let's go.
That's amazing.
And that kind of led to it. It just led to us starting a company.
I love it. I love it, dude. That's a cool path to this. So let me ask you. I know you describe Boundary as the sort of programming language for AI. So for our listeners, viewers, what does that really mean in practice?
Yeah, I think the best analogy I have is like for me, like code has always been a art form. Or code is so artistic. It's a way to manifest an idea into reality.
Hmm.
So in that world, I think ugly code has no place. Like you should write beautiful code because beautiful
Yeah.
code is maintainable, it's editable, it's better for AI and for humans. So when I think about code as to this date, I have never seen an agentic pipeline that is pretty. It's all a bunch of configs that are somehow smashed together and made it work. There's no iteration loop. No one's like if you go back to like the early days of web development
Uh-huh.
before Next.js or like before React,
Yep.
it was a bunch of jQuery code that you stitched together to make it work. And
Yep.
it did work. Like, let's not be wrong here. It did
Yeah.
work. And like PHP server side rendering worked.
But have somebody
But
go and check it out again. That'll be fun then, you know.
yeah, and like, but there's a reason that like around 2012, 2015 era, there it was a hard interview question to build an infinitely scrolling newsfeed. It was hard back then. Now it's really freaking easy because React does a lot of the stuff for you. You can build a
Mhm.
virtualized DOM trivially. Doing it back then was impossible. And I think that's the kind of thing that I realized is like React added a level of prettiness on top of code that wasn't possible. And I know everyone says that Python is a language of data science, but it's not.
Yeah.
The real syntax of data science is Jupyter notebooks. It
Yeah.
happens to use the same syntax as Python, but
Right.
Jupyter notebooks are the language of data science because the play button gives you an iteration loop that is incredibly fast.
Right there where you.
And when it comes to like AI pipelines, I think we live in this world where like you want some of the syntax of React, and I'm not saying specifically React, but the premise of React where you're merging a bunch of text or HTML with your actual business logic. So that's kind of what React does. It merges JavaScript with HTML in a way that blends the two together. So you
Yeah.
want that with prompts, but you also want the iteration loops of Jupyter notebooks where you're
Yeah.
going to hit play and iterate on it. And we tried so many different variations. We tried making config files. We tried making decorators. Nothing was just pretty. So one night we were just really bored and we said, screw it. What if we made a programming language? And it kind of just went from there. And the idea is just give yourself really pretty code that has incredibly fast iteration loops.
That's fantastic. Let me double click on this because you do bring up a couple, really good points. Yes, I mean, who does not, right? As a programmer, developer, you want, anything which is more systematic and, something to your point, beautiful and, helps and makes you efficient. But just curious, what was sort of the underlying problem? Like, how did you, okay, the idea came, it was your experience, but how did you sort of validate and what was process to make sure that it is a real problem and this is why I'm going to solve? Just curious, what was that sort of moment?
I'll tell you the moment that I think for me it made sense, because I think the moment that made sense for me was probably earlier. And whether our implementation was correct or not was a totally different problem. But like, I'll
Yeah.
screen share really fast. And I'll show you what I mean. Screen. I'll just share my whole screen. So like, if we look here, you've all probably seen code like this, where you have some prompt, then you do some stuff like this, then you call chat.client.completion.create or something like this. This is just so ugly, and I don't know how else to describe it. Like, if every single time I have to use an LLM, I have to write these 5 steps of
Right.
boilerplate code, I am just like, I'm just not feeling good writing this code. It feels like code that shouldn't be there 5 years from now.
Yeah.
And So it's really hard to say like what was the inspiration, but just like I've just written a lot of code and looked at a lot of code. And sometimes you can just look at something and say like, oh yeah, that's really well designed. And sometimes you look at something like, it's not it.
Yeah.
And that code is not it to me. And there's really subtle things about it. So in the world of prompts, you have a bunch of strings all across your code base.
Hmm.
Like ignoring all implementation details, ignoring everything else, the fact that if I have a large prompt, suddenly I'm going to be scrolling through my code and this thing is going to be scrolled all the way to the left unless I call dedent on it, is kind of silly.
Yeah.
So in BAML, one of the things that we do is strings automatically dedent themselves.
Yeah.
So all the shared white space gets removed when you actually render the string. Strings automatically trim themselves. It's small things like this that I think makes the code a lot more readable. And that's on top of all the algorithmic stuff that we do. And then the last part is like testing. Everyone I know doesn't actually test LM code. But fundamentally, it's a probabilistic system. Everyone I know that did machine learning always built tests before they built the models.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So like, how do you do that? And the reason you don't test is because like, if you saw the code that I was showing earlier,
Yeah.
at what point do you test? Do you test the response? Do you test the prompt? Like, what are you testing? It's really, really, really hard to make that decision. And as an engineering org, not much less a developer, there's no way for you as an engineering leader to enforce that your developers test.
Hmm.
And like just that mentality was something that I was like, okay, you want something that kind of makes testing so easy that when you ask an LLM to write the code, it will automatically write the test because it's the most intuitive thing for it to do.
Love it. Love it. That total makes sense, and I think I'm sure the listeners understand problem you're trying to solve. I'm going to take you back because I know that you had a Y Combinator as well, right?
Yeah, we did wise.
Yeah, so I would love to see what are some of the lessons there because I know that's community like where you just grow tremendously. Just curious, what was your experience with that?
So we actually probably had the most atypical YC experience. We actually went through like 12 pivots or something
Oh
when we
wow,
were doing this experience. It was not fun. But during the batch, so we had a bunch of pivots before the batch. Then if we had a pivot after the batch, during the batch as well, and then we had pivot once or twice during the after the batch. So we pivoted a lot before we actually landed on Boundary and BAML specifically to go work on it.
wow,
But I had a couple experiences that I put on here. Was like one, I think honestly, it's like sometimes you can just like trust yourself a little bit too much. And
like
like
dog
I know
putting
people always
blinded.
say, well, and like it's fun. I'll show you like the metrics that we had on BAML in the early days. Then we kind of made the same mistake again. But it's like fundamentally, like you have to trust yourself, but on the right dimensions.
Mm,
Like you gotta know if you yourself are a trustworthy source in this dimension. And for example, the thing we got into YC building was actually a Slack competitor,
mm,
which is very different than what we're doing now. But literally, I remember Dalton, the YC partner, literally asked us, "Why are you guys making UIs?" I wrote assembly for my career. I got paid to write assembly code. My co-founder got paid to write distributed systems at Amazon. We did not we did not make UIs. Making a Slack competitor is the silliest thing for us to do, even if we think it's a good idea. We just have no alpha there. And being honest with yourself about that sort of thing is really hard. And I remember the partners asked us, "Hey, what are we thinking about this? Why do you want to pursue this idea?" And I remember saying, "I care a lot." And there was a really funny rhetorical question they asked us, which was like, "So you think your alpha is that you care a lot?" And
that
like
is
like that can be alpha, but it's not. It's not really alpha in any meaningful sense, especially when
the
you have more
feeling.
alpha to qualify. Like the fact that we know machine learning, the fact that we know assembly, the fact that we know distributed systems, we probably should do something a little bit more fundamental and take advantage of that alpha.
That's pretty cool. So on that point, you have, I would say, even with your experience, you stated Microsoft, Google, building new thing, and now on your own with your co-founder and rest of the team, it's building something new it's not easy, right? As I mean, your experience states it's difficult. And then there is that sort of element of the research, the experimentation. So I'm just curious now, you being in the front seat, how do you sort of balance out because you got to ship the product out as well, right? So just what is sort of that balance and what have you learned and what would you sort of, if there is, somebody sort of an advice, what would that be? Like, how do you balance that out?
Yeah, I think Amazon has a leadership principle called leaders are right a lot. And like I don't really have anything good to say here. I think I just have to say like you better hope you're right because the research you're spending is time. So like for context, like I showed you guys this timeline where we spent forever on the Slack company, like 8 or 9 months. I want to show you guys how many users we had in BAML when we first started. When we first started on the first version of BAML, we had 4 users using us. 9 months later, we had 10. We better hope we were freaking right. But really, it was like, I think an important lesson there is just knowing what to bet on. So like we were really certain that BAML, like code needs to be prettier and that you need better tooling for building LLM applications. And also the idea that, hey, if to use LLMs you have to use Python and the application layer just seems wrong. You should be able to use LLMs in any code base: Python, TypeScript, Ruby, Java, Go, C++. All of them should use LLM.
Right.
In that scenario, we're like, okay, we have a core thesis. Every single code base should use LLMs. You need a really, really fast iteration loop. And three, type safety is really, really important.
Mm-hmm.
So given that premise, we just started off that thesis. And
Mm-hmm.
I think some startups take longer to build, some startups take less time to build.
Mm-hmm.
You can't make a programming language in a weekend that is actually usable. So we just took the bet and we just kept with it for about 9 to 10 months. And then after that, it did start working. Like the number of users of BAML started going up nicely exponential after that. But it wasn't, there's no real advice there. It's just like, just know what hill you want to die on. And you better hope it's the right one if you're dying on it for a while. If you think you have a personal runway of like 1 year emotionally, don't pick a project that takes 6 to 8 months to build. Like decide what your emotional and financial runway is, and then commit to an idea accordingly with those constraints.
That's spot on. So let me kind of double click just kind of on this previous questions. How do you then define, right? Because end of the day, to your point, once you have the investors, I mean, there is the accountability piece, but how do you then define and how are you defining sort of, I would say, kind of measuring the product market sort of fit, right? And I know you're targeting at this point of time developers and hopefully it'll be adopted by enterprises, but just curious to how are you defining and measuring that sort of the product market fit, you know?
Honestly, I think early stage startups should not measure that too much. Because, like, look, if you have less than like 5, 10, 20, 30,000 users, it doesn't matter. You don't need to measure any of this stuff. Here's what I think you should do. Here's what we do at least. In the very, very early days, I just check to see if once someone installed BAML code, were they asking us questions? If they asked us questions in the very early days, when we had like 5, 10, 15 users, like how often did they ask us questions? Because they asked us questions, that means they were trying to push the product further and further, and they needed to do more things. After that, I started asking myself another question. How active was the Discord? Are people asking complicated questions, simple questions? Like, what is the level of question that's being asked? Because you can't really measure volume of questions, because volume of questions is actually indicative of your docs being bad, but uh, not really that your product is necessarily good or bad. It's just like, hey, people are trying you out and figuring stuff out. So we try and measure like some approximate measure of the quality of questions being asked on Discord and the number of users that are asking them. And that gives us a pretty good proxy for how many people are using BAML. And then like now we're seeing like, for example, very recently we had a user on our Discord be like, hey, this your documentation is being flagged because we use iframes in part of our documentation. It was being flagged by some proxy service, by some security monitoring service.
Got it.
The only people running security monitoring services for every single website are enterprises.
Got
That's
it.
an enterprise customer for sure. We got that fixed within like an hour and then they could go use it. But the fact that we got a question like that meant that what kind of users using MAML? Well, that's an enterprise customer. It's not a random person that just has a random proxy to block a website. There's someone that needs their admin to approve something to go
Makes
watch
sense.
it,
Yeah.
right? So it's small things like that we've been tracking, and like that's how we continue to have conviction to keep going forward. And also, like at this point, we have customers on BAML that are doing like high 7 figures, 8 figures revenue built purely on top of BAML.
Love it.
So in that scenario, it's like these teams probably would have opted out if it was slowing them down at this point, because like, but it seems that they are doubling down and actually teaching their whole engineering team and sometimes even non-technical people how to write code. So the fact that that is happening lets us be like, okay, there's some signal there that they're pushing it further than what we intended.
Yeah.
And sometimes I used to be worried that these teams weren't asking us for questions as much along the way. But it turned out that was actually because it was the product worked. They literally never had to come to us because either the docs were up to date or the compiler was good enough or really they didn't have any breakages. So like there's some proxy that we're learning. And really what we're doing now is with some of the people that use us heavily, we're just setting up sync points with them more, be like, and learning how their usage is growing over time.
Follow-up will be you are obviously seeing an uptick and it driven by the product. You gotta give a good product to the consumer and something which works and what you're promising, and people will like it. But there is still, I'm sure, efforts from your side to build that sort of community. Like, what's the strategy there? Like, what are you guys? How are you as a founder? Like, what's the strategy? Is this really the product, or is there something else beyond that?
I don't know. Like to be honest, I just like code. Like, I think code is awesome. I think our whole team takes that same stance. And like, if you look at the best dev tools in the world, where's TypeScript's DevRel team? Where's Python's DevRel team? Where's Jupyter Notebook's DevRel team? These things don't have DevRel teams. Where's Selenium's DevRel team? Like, they don't have DevRel teams. Where's VS Code's? And I think often if you build a really, really good fucking product, people will use it and they will share. Like, if you go to a bar and ask an engineer what they want to talk about, they'll talk about some weird tech that they like.
Yeah,
They will do the marketing for you if you build something that they truly love.
love it.
So we're a really small team and we're building something incredibly hard. So we have two choices. We can spend some of our time allocating to marketing and all this other stuff, or we can just write code.
Understand. Love
So
it.
like our theory is maximize as many points as possible on code.
Yeah.
And then every now and then, like, if I'm on here, I'll take an hour-long call and chat with you because we'll have a fun conversation. That's great to do. We do like a weekly podcast where we talk about AI concepts and like surprisingly, we have
Big
like
fan of that. Big
2,500
fan.
subs on YouTube now.
Yeah.
I didn't think people would listen. We do no edits. We just raw cut Zoom
Love it.
recording for 1 hour. And it was surprising to us that many people want to listen to us talk.
Yeah.
But like that kind of stuff we will do because it's very pure in terms of what we're offering. It's just engineering advice. But like the whole premise of like, hey, let's just pay a bunch of people to go use our product, or like let's go sponsor these giant booths at these places. We don't do that. Like our theory is like if we get invited to go speak because of the merit of what we do is worthwhile adding to the event, then yes, happy to do it. But in terms of like paid sponsorship, I just think that's not the place for us yet. Maybe when we're the size of our cell, we can go do paid stuff.
Love it. So your enthusiasm is infectious, no doubt about that, and I guess that's clear. My next question will be: how do you what do you look for when hiring sort of exceptional, AI engineering talent? I know you said you have a core team, you and your founder, but just curious. Given like that enthusiasm, it's just must be very dear, most piece to you when you're bringing somebody in the core team. So what's you know, how do you do it? Like, what's sort of the strategy there?
And we've been really lucky with the people we hired. Like our first hire actually turned down a senior engineering offer at OpenAI to come work with us, and we don't pay what OpenAI pays. Our second hire is an MIT PhD, 20 years of experience, and
Love it.
I'm guessing you can guess what he was being paid in this space. Our third hire is like he wrote an entire database from scratch in Rust.
Wow.
Two of our interns have gotten YC offers and have joined YC. So like our bar is incredibly high for talent, and you're absolutely right on that. I think personally you need smaller teams to go do work, but you need people that like what they do. So we have a couple of philosophies on the team, and we just like index for that. We have probably the most atypical hiring pipeline ever. What we do is we ask people to get on a call with us for like 10, 15 minutes. If I meet them or got a reference, it's very, very short, like 10, 15 minutes. And after that, or either before that or after that, depending on how we've met you, I ask people to just send me an email that's titled Why I'm Awesome. And I want you to write an email with the 3 most incredible things you've done in your life. I don't care what they are. I just want them to be fucking incredible. Like, if I showed it to someone, they'd be like, damn, I want to meet that person.
That's amazing.
And that really is like 90% of the filter. And most people are just not really good writers. Most people don't know how to convey difficulty. Most people don't know how to communicate well or like structure a written format well. And like part of what we do, like what is the ethos of a programming language? It's really well communicating ideas. So like if you can't communicate yourself, which is something you should know better than anything else in the world.
Critical thinking 1-on-1, right? There you go. Got it.
Yeah. So that's the idea. And then after that, we have a couple more processes. It's 90% of the time the email has done more than enough.
I
But
hope some of those founders out there, they're probably just writing it down and copying it right now. That is brilliant, you right? It seems like everything is going well planned, but I'm sure there were moments it didn't go as planned. And so, how has that shaped you, your approach as a founder?
I mean, like I showed you guys, like BAML had like 10 users for the first 9 months. That is not working out for any definition of a startup by far. And we almost definitely should have pivoted. But I can tell you what I have come to believe, which is one, trust your gut. I really have learned it's like trust your gut on certain things, but definitely know when to stop trusting your gut and when to trust someone else. So that usage of like 4 to 10, I'll tell you a little bit more context about how that happened. So the first BAML syntax was designed by myself. The second BAML syntax was designed by my co-founder, Aaron. As it turns out, we have very different skill sets. I'm very good at algorithms. I'm very good at defining edge case and that stuff. But being a C++ and assembly programmer, let's just say I'm not the best at coming up with syntax that is human readable to someone that knows Python or TypeScript or something like that. One day, Aaron just we got feedback from someone being like, this just doesn't look right. I wouldn't want to write code in BAML. Next day, Aaron showed up and he's like, we're gonna get in a room and we're gonna make BAML look pretty. And I said, oh, it's gonna be so hard, so much work. And Aaron has learned something, which is he knows how to tweak my brain to make it work. Which he's like, you're a good enough programmer, you'll figure out that part. We'll figure out the rest of it, which is how do we actually make it someone say, I want to write BAML code.
Okay.
We spent 8 hours in the room together with our first engineer, and we came up with a really, really, really good syntax. And it wasn't like an Aaron thing, it wasn't a Sam thing, it was on me thing, but like Aaron definitely has a much better taste than I do. So like, what do I do? Well, most of the times, I think everyone on the team has learned we have a value on our team, which is trust yourselves, but know when to trust others. It's important to know when to take a backseat. Everyone is on the team for a reason. They belong here. They have value to produce. You don't need to do the thing that they're good at doing. Just leverage that person. And that's really what I do when stuff gets hard. I find the right person to identify, find out who's the one that can like take us through that part of the problem, and just like take the back seat. And we don't have to do all of it.
Wonderful. So, as I said, I think I earlier mentioned moving so fast, everything, right? And I'm sure you have the front seat, you and your team. What does the future looks like to you, like especially AI infrastructure, like in the next 5 to 10 years? I know it's a bloated question, but just curious to hear your thoughts.
Well, 10 years from now, I think there's this general thing going on where people are like, oh, we don't have to write code. We don't have to do any of this stuff. I think that's incorrect. I think we will be writing code. I think, in fact, everyone in the world will be writing code. Today, everyone's a writer. Tomorrow, everyone's going to be a coder. Some people will be better than everyone else, but everyone will write code. Everyone in the world can use Excel today. I don't think it's a skill to use Excel. It is a skill to be able to run a billion-dollar company on Excel, but it's not a skill to use Excel. And I think the same thing will be true with software. So, like, my mom should be an engineer. She should be able to call herself a software engineer to some degree, for sure. In that world, a couple things have to be different. Software will not be what it is today, for sure. The IDE will not be what it is today. It will be different. And like, why do I so strongly believe that English can't be the lingua franca here? Well, it's because like, if you've ever used Python, there are these really, really weird people out there who will write a C library and expose it in Python so you as a Python dev can be happy. For example, if you use NumPy, if you use any of these core libraries, there's someone weird out there that has done all this work to make it possible.
Possible for you to use it.
All this stuff is designed in C so that you as a Python dev can survive. And like the reason, and C has this escape hash to assembly, because anytime you're a C dev and you can't make it fast enough, you have to go down to assembly. So the point is, you have to have some syntax that exposes your higher level syntax to the actual machine code at some point. And English does not have that escape hatch. And the minute you add any specific syntax that allows you to go down to machine code or through C or Python, you are no longer in English. You are writing some programming language. And that we hope is BAML.
All right. So actually, you just answered my sort of follow-up question. What will be the role you think in this 5, 10 years the boundary will play in that evolution, right?
So we think you will write some syntax. We think that syntax may even be 90% English. The cool part about BAML is it's designed to go support that workflow, where a large part of our syntax should be English, and some parts of it will not be. And that's where we want to fit in and play.
Wonderful. Say, what advice would you give some of the engineers or early stage founders building an AI today? I'm sure a lot of them are still standing on the sidelines and trying to make that decisions.
Firstly, I would say we're not that far ahead at all. I think this AI space moves so fast that like if you ever think that you're losing probably. So if you think you're winning, you're probably not. That's the first thing I'd say. But the second thing I would say is like you should really know if you want to do this founder thing. This founder thing is miserable in every dimension. It is not fun. You get underpaid. No one really wants to work for you because you probably have, like, if you see the job offers out there today, it's just really, really hard to convince great people to work with you. Everyone is like, you're working way more hours than you expect to work. It is miserable in every dimension. And it comes at a real cost to the rest of your life as well. But if like hearing this, you're like, nah, I still want to be a founder, you probably should be a founder. There has been no better time in life other than right now to go be a founder. And if you enjoy it, this journey is the most fun you'll ever have. But don't accidentally work on stuff just to make money. Like, unless money is the thing that you truly value, which is fine too. Like, find the thing that you care about and go do that thing. And for me, for example, the thing that I really care about is I love the idea of fabric. So like, what is fabric in the world of software? Well, to me, Amazon built fabric for web services. There's like a layer of fabric that Amazon owns. Facebook built fabric for the layer of what I would call like communication. If you're communicating, you're 90% of the time using Facebook or iMessage. And there's this layer of like, there's these certain companies that build that layer of fabric. and I want to build some fabric in life. That's what I want to do. I'm motivated by that. So I will work as hard as possible to make that happen, and it is fun. It is
What is that
exhilarating.
fabric? Find that fabric. I love it. I love it. Find
That's
that.
for me. But for
Yeah.
other people, they might have some other motivation. But know
Yeah.
yourself really well so you don't accidentally be sad being a founder pursuing something you don't care about. Like care.
Wonderful. I asked earlier 5 to 10 years, but let's shorten it. What are you most excited about in the next year for Boundary?
I wish I could show you some of the new stuff that we have.
I love
We're
it.
gonna reveal it
I'll
really
wait.
soon.
I'll be on the podcast. I'll be on the podcast watching your videos. I'll do that. I'll wait. I have no problems
It's
with that. Okay.
in about January, you're gonna reveal some really, really cool things.
Amazing.
But really, I think one of the few things that I'm specifically excited about is one, like just hiring a few more folks and growing the team a little bit out. Not too much, just like we hand select for that. But like the other part is just like it's wild to me that people use BAML. Like we made a stupid programming language and people use it and they love it and they tell their friends about it. They tell the world
Yes.
about it. So what I'm really excited about is like seeing how the growth continues into next year and like how much people hopefully use and like push the boundary of what's possible using BAML for AI. I think the first demo that I usually showed people when I first did AI stuff is this one. And this is something we've done in BAML now for months. But it's like, I don't know, let's just take like a live webcam. So I'll just do this. So like this is it, and I'll just run this. And normally if I ask the model to go and extract information out of a thing like this, you wouldn't really trust it. But here you can.
Wow.
And like this is something that's using like last year's models. It doesn't really matter. It's all like old stuff. And
Wow.
you can do it with all sorts of stuff. Like take like a really complicated visa form. And like again, typically you could never trust a model to extract data out of here. But all of a sudden it suddenly becomes possible in a highly dynamic environment.
That's amazing.
And I normally would not trust, but I can.
There it is.
And that is cool to me.
There it is.
So like
Love it.
this is kind of how I think of the world, as in like what I think should be possible and should not be possible. And I just want to share this with more people.
Awesome, my man. If you could leave the listeners with one big idea about the future of AI, what would it be, Vaibhav?
So obviously I'm biased, but like you should probably use BAML to go write your AI pipelines and then they will actually work. It's probably the big one, but really it's that AI is really a philosophy of building trust with the end user and your product. Anytime you use AI, what you really need is a trust building exercise. And anytime your product fails, and you don't explain that in the best way possible to the user, your user will lose trust. And that's why we end up in this world where people say AI doesn't work. It does
Yeah.
work. You just need to build the right UXs and the right systems around your system to make it work. And that's one of the things that we do well over at BAML.
Wonderful. Vaibhav, what a pleasure. Wishing you and your team continued success. I know you guys are solving some real problem. So again, cannot thank you enough. Love the conversation. Wishing you the best and hope to have you again. Okay.
Thank you so much for having us. It was tons of fun.